bring some.
That with African Guarantee, yes, and possibly AFDB.
Correct, yes. Some international and regional finance houses as well. And then you have got the competitive bidding on your EPC. I think we can actually be able to raise that money. But raising it domestically, I don't think that's possible.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Ephraim. Let's go to my sister Manyara. Are you as optimistic from the survey? I mean, you auditing the companies, you seeing the real results, we can't fudge it when you are around. What are your perspectives?
Thank you, Doc. And I would want to thank the Zimbabwe National Chamber of Commerce for having me here on this panel. And I would want to commend them for the survey that was done. This survey is a very independent survey. It was done by people. Some of them were not maybe part of the Zimbabwe National Chamber of Commerce, but they are people who are in business, who are affected one way or the other. So when everything is said and done, when we talk about economics, when we talk about the mega projects that we have, everything that boils down to the numbers, because they say numbers don't lie. So at the end of the day, what's important is for those numbers to speak what they must speak. And also, because we are operating within a certain jurisdiction, every business then has to comply with the laws of the land. So when I'm looking at the survey that was done by the Zimbabwe National Chamber of Commerce, there are a number of issues that have been raised in that report which came in as feedback, of which, Doc, I think I'll also answer your question as I go through my presentation. So I think I'm going to touch on about three main things that I've just summarized. First and foremost, we are looking at the compliance aspect in terms of the taxation system that we have in the country. Then I'll also look at the factors that are affecting our numbers in as far as maybe reporting or financial reporting is concerned, which is more on the hyperinflation side as well as the exchange rates. I know my colleagues have said something along those lines, but I'm coming in from a different angle completely. I'm not an economist, but we are operating in this country. Maybe if I may start with the taxation system that we have in our country. If you are looking at the survey results, basically the taxation system has been cited as one of the factors that have ranked Zimbabwe poor on the ease of doing business. And as we are looking at it, the question is, why is it like that? And some of the issues that have been raised include maybe more like a complicated taxation system, as well as a costly taxation system, especially where at the end of the day, the aspect of compliance becomes too costly to the taxpayer. And the question is, what is it that we must do? Yes, we are saying that the government is doing a lot in that respect. But from the feedback that we got from business, there are issues that need to be taken care of in as far as that taxation system is concerned. Because again, it also boils down to the numbers to then say, how much should we then pay? And to what extent can we be compliant? Because we would want businesses to be voluntarily compliant instead of being forced. But if the system is structured in such a way that it makes compliance costly, it means that at the end of the day, it is difficult for the businesses. So maybe just looking at that aspect, when we are looking at ZIMRA, for example, we have the e-filing system that we have. But the question is it as efficient and as effective as we want it to be as taxpayers? Some may say it is, but the majority, and even according to the survey results, it is not like that. And maybe looking at that as well, it might be an issue whereby we may want Zimra to relook at its IT systems to then say, to what extent can they serve the business, the taxpayer? We've got different types of taxpayers, different categories. And if Zimra is to simply bundle all those taxpayers into one category, we then have the effects that we are suffering at the moment in terms of trying to get the tax clearance certificates. It becomes very difficult. So at the end of the day, the ease of doing business becomes an issue, because it means as a business person, I cannot maybe supply or I cannot bid because I don't have the relevant documents. So I think it's just encouraging maybe government to ensure that we have efficient tax systems. If it means that the issue is around human capital, then let's have the human capital skilled so that they are able to take care of the issues that are being raised. Because it's one thing to have bodies occupying certain positions, yet at the end of the day, we are not getting the service that we need. So at the end of the day, for the sake of ease of doing business, it is one area which I believe needs to be looked at. And then coming to the issue of the exchange rate. As you are aware, we have got a lot of exchange rates in the country. And of course, it also goes back to the issues around numbers. What numbers are we talking about? We've got two groups of exchange rates that we have. We've got the informal exchange rates and we've got the formal exchange rates. From the formal side, maybe we are talking about the willing buyer, willing seller. We are talking about the auction system. We are talking about interbank system. And on the informal side, you have got the RTGS rate, you have got the ZIPIT rate, you have got the ELCOSH rate. So at the end of the day, we've got a whole jungle of exchange rates that we have. And this alone then makes it very difficult for businesses to even know which ones to use. So the aspect of exchange rates, even from the reporting perspective, also becomes problematic, because as a nation, we've got certain laws or certain statutes that we follow in as far as financial reporting is concerned. And when certain policies then come into play going against those statutes, it then becomes very difficult, simply because we then see that there are some policy inconsistencies which makes reporting difficult. So at the end of the day, even when you are trying to report to an investor, you're also wondering, which exchange rate can I use? Can I use the willing buyer, willing seller? Can I use the interbank? And whilst the government maybe might say that there might be a convergence in as far as the exchange rates are concerned, we are not so sure, especially when we are looking at maybe the next few months. It can be 2 months, 3 months, or even 12 months. We are not so sure, because we don't know what policies are going to be put in place. If our policies were consistent, then at least would be very much able to predict what is going to happen. So in that respect, I think it is very important to then ensure that whatever policies that we are putting in place will not make it difficult for those who prepare the financial statements. And so that even the investors are able to understand our financial statements, because we've got these so many exchange rates. Then lastly, touching on hyperinflation. In as much as at this point in time, we might be saying that inflation is going down, but when we are looking at hyperinflation, we are saying that maybe over a period of 3 years, the cumulative inflation would be above 100%, which maybe at this point in time, that is where we are. And also from a reporting perspective, there are also challenges that come about with hyperinflation reporting, because we've got certain standards that we then need to follow in as far as a hyperinflationary economy is concerned. And the challenges that we then have is whether those figures will be meaning something to any investor or to a shareholder who is outside Zimbabwe. Is it going to mean something? Or maybe they would want something else. So at the end of it all, what's important is as we are grappling with hyperinflation even as a country, the issues around policy consistency also come into play. And also to say, what is it that we are putting in place to ensure that we kept this hyperinflation? While we've got policies that have been put in place to try and take care of hyperinflation, the question is, are we not also killing the other side of business? You talk about the 200% interest on loans. While it was put in place to deal with speculative purposes, but on the other hand, there were businesses that were affected. So these policies, as we look at them, the issue is, are we dealing with short-term solutions to deal with long-term issues? And I think it is something that maybe we then need to look into. Because anything can happen from now. We don't know what is going to happen, but the issue at the end of the day is on policy consistencies to ensure that businesses are able to operate, they are able to attract investment, they are able to report the numbers that actually reflect what is actually happening on the ground without a lot of distortions. I think, as you are aware, where we are looking at hyperinflation and exchange rates, a lot of businesses, where it concerns audits, have had qualified audit opinions, not because they wanted to, but because of what is happening at the macroeconomic level, where it concerns those policies as well, whereby we have got the statutes that we follow saying something around the exchange rates, but we also have other policies that are coming into play. And because there is a divergence between those two, it means that at the end of the day, a lot of businesses then got those qualified opinions, simply because what the accounting standard was requiring was completely different, or there was a gap with what was being used because of government policies. So I think there is the need to then to have then engagements, consultations with all the stakeholders within the economy, not just one side, but everybody who is affected, so that we then have their views, we highlight the risks, mitigatory measures are then put in place, so that whenever a policy is then put in place, we know that the whole economy is covered, and maybe we then won't be having all these inconsistencies. I thank you.
Okay. Very pointed. I'm observing two things from the finance bill, which you obviously went through in detail. It's now very clear you will report in the local currency and have tax returns in the local currency for your local currency transactions. Then you will also report in Forex for all your Forex transactions. And you will pay the tax in the respective currency. There will also be penalties, no longer delayed penalties for one. That statute is very clear. You delay your tax payment or submission, technically it means you pay the $30 per day for your local and the $30 per day for your foreign. I mean, all those are actually happening, and I was interested in your comments. So that's one observation from the finance bill that's been tabled. And I would hope that you will be making submissions as I guess you're part of the Institute of Chartered Accountants. But there was an anomaly with regards to what rate we use. And they spoke about an average rate. Now, I don't know what that is in the finance bill. So I'm hoping to get your response. Because in banking parlance, we have a spot rate, not an average rate of the array of that were pointed out. So how do I do my taxes? Do I stick to the finance bill and use an average of these, or what? I mean, what is your interpretation of that? The second observation I'm also making is a migration that seems to be very clear on the publicly listed companies away from the stock exchange to the Victoria Falls Stock Exchange. Should we all perhaps be migrating there? Your observations and comments around that?
Thank you. Maybe looking at the first one, in terms of the average rate, I think it goes back to what I said to then say, we've got certain inconsistencies that we have along the way, because maybe at one point we are prescribing that we need to use this, at the other time we are more like maybe hiding behind the average rate, because we've got two groups of exchange rates. One is we've got the formal exchange rates, but there is also the other side of things, which in as much as you may want to ignore it, it is there. So in that case, I think there's a need to really have clarity in terms of what average really means. That is how I can respond to that aspect.
I don't want you to qualify my books, Manyara. I'm saying, in light of these observations, what would how do we enhance this discussion? And I know, again, is there any Ministry of Finance official that is here? Or will they deny that they are here? Anyway, we've got Ministry of Industry and Commerce, who are our reporting ministry. What recommendations would you say around that? Because quite often it's easy for us to sit down and critique without offering a solution. So I'm always in favor of saying, okay, it's one thing to say average is wrong. I mean, my friend gave the technical analysis of what average means. And my definition of average means what? Best of the worst and worst of the best. So average is actually a terrible definition. So I'm coming to you, Manyara, and saying, what recommendations specifically? Because the penalties could be heavy. Remember, we are charged interest rates for non-compliance. So what recommendation would you be making ahead of that finance bill being adopted? In its current framework, it says average. That's very vague. So what would you be saying? Should we go to spot? Should we be looking at just they publicly declare that we are using the willing buyer, willing seller rate plus the auction rate, which was my interpretation of average, but then you bring in the realism and tell us that the market rate, which they don't want to see, by the way. If you're on any WhatsApp group, you stand warned. Do not be quoting rates on WhatsApp. This is the official position, isn't it? Are we together?
Yes.
So, Manyara, what is average? And how do we deal with this issue around, a finance bill that actually makes sense to us, let alone a foreign investor who comes and says, now, how do I compute my tax?
Well, Doc, allow me to say at this point in time, I may not be in a position to give you the answer, but I believe it is something maybe that needs to be taken back to the respective stakeholders so that it can be discussed again. It needs to be looked into so that at the end of the day, it becomes very clear to whoever is going to be using that bill. So at the end of the day, I can't give you a definite answer, but it needs discussions, maybe some round table with the relevant stakeholders.
Fair enough. Folks, let's open up our discussion. We've got about 20 minutes to deliberate on the survey. We don't want to be locked and lost elsewhere in the forest. Any comments, any observations? There should be a roaming mic. Just identify yourself, ask our panelists or comment. If we can have a roving mic. Any comments, any observations? If there are none, I'll start provoking people. Our Deputy Chairman of ZIDA is here, and I cannot resist but ask if we were to set up a power subcommittee to deal with the national power crisis on behalf of the private sector, could you make your one-stop center effective for us to have power plants in place by January, for example? I'll ask her to identify herself. I spotted her.
Okay, thank you. Afternoon. I'm Dr. Sylvia Otete Masango, former Permanent Secretary of the Ministry of Primary and Secondary Education, and former Permanent Secretary of Ministry of Women Affairs. I am also a business person. We are into manufacturing, and we have a factory in Marondera. What I'm wearing is from that factory. And,
but of course, I'm asking you as Deputy Chairman of CIDA.
I'm coming up. Introduce yourself. So I'm introducing myself.
Thank you, well done.
So we are facing the same problem when it comes to, we normally just say ZESA. Yeah, it's a problem. And you run industrial machines on a generator, and you know what that means. But anyway, coming to ZIDA, Zimbabwe Investment Agency, which really was set up by government mainly to address the ease of doing business. I think we have been talking about it. That ZIDA should actually be a one-stop center. And His Excellency is very clear in terms of what should be done. And some of the areas you have raised really would, yes, it would be of interest to ZIDA, but in terms of trying to attract investors, the environment should be conducive. So what has been done is that when we talk of ZIMRA, we talk of the deeds office, we talk of all those other players, even the Ministry of Industry. It has been seen that all that should be done under one house. So when an investor, whether it be an international investor or a local investor, when you come into the country wanting to set up a business either under 3 PPs or whatever, everything must be done within ZIDA, rather than you being referred from one office to the other. So, but in most cases, you find investors prefer to go to either ministries, to go to all these other players, because this is what they have been used to. Yeah, so, but when it comes to your question, I think it is a question that cannot be addressed by ZIDA alone. It is a question that should be addressed by all of us. My daughter there, she is actually my daughter. The mother is sitting here. My Matsima, my sister. So she has also given us examples of what could be done to circumvent the current challenge that we have. So I don't think I can give you a direct answer to that. But otherwise, what I want to say is ZIDA is there, and some of the findings from the survey have already been said by industry from time to time, and we are also looking at those. And His Excellency has even given us the opportunity to revisit some of the acts that are inhibiting us in terms of our ease of doing business. I end there. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Reminder, we are ranked 184th out of 201 that were surveyed. And so that rating must move. PS, you want to disappear. Any comments before you leave? None. I hope you will take heed of the survey and assist us.
Just to say thank you very much, and I am really enriched with the comments and presentations. Thank you, ZNCC, you chose the best. Thank you very much, it was very enriching. I'm hoping you continue following after leaving behind colleagues who will be with you. I've got several colleagues, that's why I have to leave now. Thank you so much.
Okay. As she leaves, I know she gave me the look when I said government operates at 3 speeds. Her ministry is fast, very fast, and consider it done. Is that fair? And if she doesn't live up to that, come and see me and I will chase her up. Okay. Any other questions or comments? Yes, Commissioner Bloban from ZAC, corruption featured very strongly. I noticed one of your colleagues left early enough, leaving the throne to you to deal with corruption. What sayest thou?
Yes, indeed, the results of the survey were quite a surprise. That corruption was ranked so highly by the respondents, and it means as a commission we have an uphill task in terms of dealing with the perception. It's not just perception, but in most cases it's reality. What we have observed is that members of the public are concerned with what they consider corruption, and in most cases it will be relating to poor service delivery. In their interpretation of poor service delivery is that it's corruption. And well, you can't really say it's not, or you can't say it is, because what we've also observed is that corruption, mismanagement, inefficiencies, they all reside in the same room. So sometimes it's very difficult to make a distinction of whether it's inefficiency or it's outright corruption. But we've also observed that working with the public institutions, because our interventions have really been, in the last 3 years, have been focused on the public sector, and where we were focusing on expenditure, on trying to ensure that expenditures are within the allowable limits as prescribed by the various pieces of legislation. But going into 2023, our focus will now be on looking at revenue leakages, which we have observed could be emanating from the private sector, hence our involvement in this conference, so that we can begin to engage the private sector. So which is why it was a surprise that they would consider corruption as high, as a factor that is bringing about a poor ease of doing business. And coming to what Manyana also pointed out, which is quite a concern, I'm sure everyone is aware that there have been complaints or issues raised around implementation of the Auditor General's recommendations, which year in, year out she makes, and they are not implemented. We also established through a survey that we did last year, where we met 144 public institutions. We established that some of the findings by the Auditor General related to the non-compliance to international accounting standards, particularly IS 29, which talks about reporting in a hyperinflationary environment, as well as IS 20 that relates to foreign exchange. I think IS 2021, I'm not sure, forgotten, but it's something to do with the exchange rate. So those two standards really have been problematic because they were contrary to the SI that was promulgated. So it means with the proposals that you're talking about, Dr. Nadia Chanakara, it means it's going to be worse because we do not have the capacity. If we have challenges with IS 29, if you're going to bring in another dimension, what it means is the numbers of findings or recommendations by the Auditor General that are going to remain unimplemented are going to increase. And when that happens, it's interpreted as Zimbabwe is very corrupt. So even from a corruption perception index, we're ranked very badly. And one of the issues is that we're not implementing the Auditor General's recommendations. But the auditor recommendations, some of them are very basic, relate to things that could be done, but there's no capacity in doing them. Like things like updating the register, fixed asset register, carrying out bank reconciliations, really mundane things, but they're not being implemented. So this, it might mean, if that clause is not relooked at, it might mean additional problems in terms of perception that Zimbabwe is corrupt because we're not implementing the Auditor General. That would be my contribution. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I certainly know my sister to be very accessible, and I would hope that these interactions that they are making to be sitting amongst us allows us to whisper in their ears where we are seeing corruption and or perceiving corruption to be there. Tandy, what is your number? She's that sort of person that I know, you know, when these commissions are appointed and then they are reappointed, there are some who you hope stay there because you have access to them. And I know I have access to this one. That's why I'm asking for her number, so that you who are perceiving there is corruption can contact people like her. Sister, what is your number?
Yes, as that spokesperson, I have to give you my number. It's 0712 909 733. That's my official number.
Please repeat it. Please repeat it.
0712 909 733.
Okay, there you have it. Thank you, Sister. Before we go to the gentleman there, we have quite a prominent lawyer sitting amongst us, Sisera Moyo. Corruption, what is your perception? We actually moved on. I am the former chairman of ZIA, and one of the things we actually recommended from my board was we wanted ZIDA to be established, and we have it. So I'm thrilled that ZIDA now exists, because we had no power. We're a board that was toothless. That ZIDA board has power to be able to implement projects. But another fundamental one had to do with this perception of corruption. And we recommended that they set up a commercial court system. Now that commercial court has been functional. I mean, obviously COVID happened and it kind of messed up things. Sarah, can you perhaps comment on the cases you are seeing around corruption? Is it real? Is it perceived? And are we not better off now that we've got a commercial court system, which should be processing things a whole lot faster and hopefully should be cleaner than the traditional other court systems? Over to you.
Right, thank you, Nigel, and good afternoon, everyone. Nigel, you've thrown me on the spot because I'm actually not a criminal lawyer. So I think I may have some challenges in dealing with the issue of what is trend as far as the prosecution of cases of corruption. But what I can say and confirm is that we do have a commercial court which is dealing with matters that fall under the jurisdiction of that court. And with now the Judicial Services Commission having digitized the courts, we are definitely seeing an improvement in the rate at which matters are brought before the courts and dealt with